During our stay in the hostel, my parents managed to save some money. They also borrowed the rest of the money they needed and bought a plot of land in the city. The plot of land came with a magnificent garden and an unfinished big house, which my parents finished over the summer. Accordingly, we moved into our new private home. Meanwhile, Mom's sister, Aunt Melissa, had bought a delightful one-bedroom apartment on the opposite side of town. This meant that she and her husband moved farther away from us, which resulted in us seeing each other less often. Both my mom and Aunt Melissa worked at the same hospital. My mom as a nurse and Aunt Melissa as a doctor. Sometimes Aunt Melissa would come to our house on weekends to take a sauna bath, at first accompanied by her husband, but then she began to come alone. However, as was customary, the sauna trips were followed by heavy drinking. If Mom drank a little to keep her company, Dad and Aunt Melissa drank more than usual. As a result, Aunt Melissa would stay overnight. More often than not, the intoxicated auntie would go to the guest house alone because she had been spoiling herself with alcohol and couldn't get around on her own. Eventually, my father succumbed to his drinking, periodically not coming home for the night. As an excuse, he would make up stories about drunkenly spending the night at friends' houses. Naturally, each of his domestic escapades led to a violent scandal. Mother tolerated all this, tolerated to the last. However, when kind-hearted people reported that the father not only excessively consumes alcohol, but also enters into numerous adulteries with one woman, the patience of the mother finally burst. So she began divorce proceedings and demanded a division of property, again borrowing a substantial amount of money. The mother paid the father half of the cost of the house and property, after which they separated, and he moved to live with his own mother. Of course, to live in a private house without a man is difficult, so all the men's work at home almost entirely fell on my shoulders, but there were advantages to it. Dad was such a bore that spoiled my whole life. Unlike him, my mother treated me well, and I was even glad that my parents separated. I had my freedom. Mother still left for work early at the beginning of 7 and returned around 6 in the evening, and weekends were busy with household chores. She was usually punctual and never stayed late at work, but this Friday she stayed longer than usual and came home late with molasses. They were celebrating some event at work and were quite tipsy, having brought more snacks and drinks with them. I realized the banquet was going to continue. Actually, my mother rarely drank before she divorced my father, only when she was a guest, and only a little. But here I was surprised. It was the first time I'd seen my mother in such a state. She had a lot to drink, not to mention my aunt, who was very drunk. But nevertheless, she brought food to the table in the guest room, and she and Molasses sat there at the table for a long time, drinking a little at a time, discussing women's problems. After poking around a little at home, I went outside to the boys, came home late when everyone was already asleep. When I entered the house, I heard loud snoring. I thought that everyone was asleep in the house, including my aunt. In order not to wake anyone up, I went straight to my room without turning on the light. I sometimes slept there in the summer when I came home late. This time I decided to sleep in the kitchen, so that I wouldn't have to listen to the musical snoring that was spreading throughout the house. When I entered the kitchen, I saw the remains of the feast and 2 shot glasses on the table. It looked like it had been a good party. They even forgot to turn off the kitchen light, I thought. Just as I was about to drink my tea, I heard a soft snore from the next room. I wondered who it was, because everyone in the house was asleep. Quickly going to the door, I opened the curtain and peeked into the bedroom. There was a drunk Aunt Melissa lying on the bed I was about to sleep on. It was stuffy in the bedroom, so Aunt Melissa was only in a light t-shirt. In shorts, I stood at the bedroom door and looked at her sleeping. After standing like that and thought for a while, I decided to at least examine my aunt from all sides. The thought even made my lower abdomen tingle. I gathered my courage and slowly made my way towards her. My thoughts began to fantasize while continuing to make sure she didn't wake up. I decided to be brave, but I didn't know how it would end. I had already taken over my mind, unable to think of anything. At that moment, she suddenly woke up and I expected her reaction, and by her actions, she made it clear that she didn't mind. We quickly closed the doors and got down to business. I was experiencing indescribable bliss and turbulent emotions. Toward morning, I quietly ran out of the room so my mom wouldn't see us. Proud of myself that I could do such an act, I went to sleep in the house on my couch, not realizing that my mother could see me. I woke up in the morning feeling a mixture of emotions, excitement over what had happened to Aunt Melissa, but also guilt and worry that my mom would find out. When I walked into the kitchen, Mom was already making breakfast. She gave me a warm smile and said, "You look tired. Didn't you sleep well?" I hesitated, wondering if she had somehow guessed. A few minutes later, Aunt Melissa appeared, looking slightly disheveled, but acting demure. We said hello politely. Mom suggested that Melissa join us for breakfast before heading home, and she agreed. Throughout the meal, I avoided making eye contact with Melissa for fear that Mom would notice. When Melissa left, Mom said, "Melissa had a little too much to drink last night. I'm glad we have a guest room so she didn't have to drive home." I nodded, feeling relieved that she didn't suspect anything. Over the next few weeks, I often thought about that occasion of the night with Melissa. I wanted more, but I didn't know how we could do it again. One Saturday, while my mom was working the night shift, I received a text from Melissa asking if I was home alone. My heart raced with excitement. Within an hour, she was already standing on our doorstep and smiling slightly at me. We started right where we left off. Our meetings continued in secret for months. It was our exciting little secret. At some point, Melissa wanted more. She asked me to go out of town with her for a weekend. As tempted as I was, I just couldn't bring myself to leave my mother. Eventually, Melissa said she couldn't settle for just brief moments here and there. She started seeing a doctor from her hospital. I was heartbroken when we stopped seeing each other. But with time, I was able to move on with my life and even rebuild my relationship with my father a little. Now, Melissa and I are still friends when we see each other, but we keep our past affair to ourselves. I will never forget that incredible summer.